Today on Socialautie, we're talking about fear. Fear seems pretty simple, right? Pretty direct. Not if you're autistic. Fight or flight, we know that. That's an immediate physical threat response. We know what it feels like. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow and increased rapidity, it becomes shallow. Your vision and hearing are on high alert. We know what that fight or flight from our amygdala feels like, right? But what does fear feel like when it's subtle and you aren't even aware of it? Becoming aware of what kind of fear we're experiencing is crucial as we begin our unmasking journey. As late identified adult autistics, fear is what will stop us from trying new things. And it can be so subtle that we aren't even aware that it's changing how we're living or the choices that we're making in our everyday life. So today, let's talk about fear. Let's talk about fear as we experience it as autistics, that subtle fear. There's a quote that I'd like to start with, and it's from a book called Dune by Frank Herbert. And since I went to LSU, we'd say a bear. But I really like this quote. It's about fear, but I like how it phrases fear and how we should approach fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. I love this quote because it makes you think about fear in a different way. It makes you realize that fear is temporary, that it will pass over you, it will pass through you, and that it will go away, it will disappear, it will evaporate. And when it's gone, you turn your inner eye, your higher thinking brain, inward, and you start to evaluate the path that the fear took. Where did it originate? How did I respond to it? When it left, how did I feel in its wake? When it's gone, there's nothing left behind in a physical sense, but you remain. It's pretty deep. But I had an experience with fear recently, and I noticed that fear, especially for us as adult autistics, can be very subtle. Yes, we have anxiety and we have those feelings that well up, and we know when a full-on panic attack is happening. We know when we have that fight or flight response. If you're like me and you have some of those trigger issues from things in your past, from abuses, or you've got some PTSD, there are things that your body will let you know. And without a doubt, you know that it's happening. Sometimes you feel like you're back in that moment again. And when you experience that, it is very real and it is very physical. It is not just a memory. It is something you full on experience in a physical sense. But what I want to talk about today is that subtle fear, the one where you're not breathing heavy, you're not breathing shallow, your heart rate isn't speeding up necessarily. It's the subconscious, subtle fear that I want to talk about today, because I think it's probably more dangerous in the big picture than just that immediate fight or flight response that we might feel when we have a physical threat or we've got something that's brought up the memory of a physical threat. And the reason I want to talk about the subtle fear is because I didn't know, I didn't realize, I wasn't aware that fear could behave in this way. I always thought fear was just this immediate physical response to a threat or something that was happening to protect myself. And yeah, it is. But this subtle fear, I think personally can be more damaging because it happens without us being fully conscious of it. It is our subconscious responding and protecting ourselves, but not necessarily in the best way. So let me be specific, because you're probably thinking, what do you mean by subtle fear? I don't get it. I don't understand. Let me explain it to you. I had an incident a couple weeks ago where I was personally, verbally attacked about who people thought I was, people who didn't know me, people who were making assumptions about who I am as a person and as an autistic person. And what was really upsetting and what really I think got me the most is that it was by people who were also autistic. And I'm thinking, hey, are we not supposed to be even kinder to one another because we know what the other person is struggling with to a certain degree? So that really hurt me, I think, worse than if it had just been somebody that I some random person in the world, right? I had a set of expectations for other people who are autistic to treat me in a more respectful way. And I get everybody has their own hurts, their own agendas, but I so do not subscribe to or believe that I have the right to judge or criticize anybody else's journey or their process or how they say something in a way that's going to be hurtful to them. As autistics, we're in a pretty tight community in the sense that we try and gravitate towards one another for support, for encouragement, for relational issues so that we don't feel so darn alone all the time, so that we know that somebody else has had an experience that we've had. And there's a group of people out there that if you're autistic and they're also autistic and you say something in a way that they don't agree with or that in their mind and their perception is somehow offensive, they're not going to come and say, hey, the way you said that really upset me in this way. And based on sort of my history and the experiences I had, the way that you said something bothered me. And have a conversation about it. Have a discussion. None of us ever says anything to intentionally hurt or upset or trigger somebody else. We speak from a place of where we are and sort of where we're experiencing and how we're experiencing the world. And there has to be some compassion and some understanding for one another. And I didn't get that from some people recently. And the subtle part of this that I'm getting to in a roundabout way, is that they infiltrated my personal group and behaved in ways that were just unacceptable. And because of that, I didn't have a direct sense of fear. I didn't have a fear in the sense that I was being physically threatened. And it was super subtle. And I didn't start to recognize it really until yesterday. I knew on some level that I had changed and altered my behavior based on responding to those situations that happened. But I didn't realize how much until yesterday. I'm a huge believer in only things that get measured can get changed and made better. You can only improve on things that you're measuring. Because if you don't measure something, then how do you know how you've gotten any better? How do you know if something's working or not? And I looked at data yesterday because I look at data for my YouTube channel to see, hey, how many views have I gotten? Are people engaging? Because I want to know, am I doing something that is helping you? And I ask you these questions and I read your comments and I respond to you because what you say and how you're getting information and if it's helping you and how you're using it matters to me. And I looked at the views for my channel and I thought, wow, they've really dropped off. And I thought, what am I doing differently? And that's when I realized that I had made some subtle changes, ones that I really wasn't paying attention to. I knew I wasn't posting in groups like I normally had. I wasn't sharing the latest video or engaging and talking about, what the video was about and what I was doing. I'd stopped. And the reason was there's this subtle, quiet fear that I didn't want to put myself in a position to be attacked by people that I thought I was supposed to be safe with. And I had altered my behavior. I had altered what I was doing because of fear. And when I realized this yesterday, I thought, this is crazy. I cannot allow myself to be subtly manipulated. And I was doing it to myself in the sense that I wasn't being the same person that I was and that I am. I had allowed a social hurt. I had allowed someone else's behavior and treatment of me and how it hurt me. I allowed the fear from that hurt, not wanting to experience it again, to affect the way I was living my life and how I was serving other people. And I wasn't. And to me, that's criminal. That's wrong. That is so incredibly wrong on so many levels, to allow what I'm doing and the service that I am trying to provide and the person that I am at my core to be hurt and afraid to live in a way that is authentic and sharing because of how somebody else treated me and the subtle changes in my life that I made to accommodate somebody else's bad behavior and wrong, mean, unacceptable behavior. That's not okay with me. And I don't want it to be okay with you either. I don't want you to live your life in a way that these subtle fears are stopping you, from being your authentic self, from being your fully autistic, amazing self. This week, we're going to be talking about fear, because fear is the big thing that stops us from being who we are, from doing things in our life that are important to our quality of life, to trying new things. Fear is the mind killer. It's the thing that will stop you in your tracks, whether you're conscious of it or if it's unconscious. And this week, I want us to become more aware of where that subtle fear is creeping in. Where are you changing or making accommodations in your life because you're afraid of experiencing the hurt that someone may have inflicted on you? Be it physical, be it emotional. This weekend, I want you to get your journal out, and I want you to reflect and look at your life and see today, what am I doing? What things am I avoiding? How have I changed in the last few years in ways that if I'm really being honest with myself, I'm not doing them. I'm not doing certain things, or I'm avoiding certain things, or I'm doing other things to keep from experiencing that hurt again. That awareness, just like my awareness, when you measure something, you know what's working and what's not, and you know when you can make changes and how to make changes. So look at your life and see where it is that you see that fear has crept in and you haven't really noticed. It's sneaky and it's subtle and it creeps in slowly. And it might be days or weeks or months or even years before you realize that you've changed who you are, what you do, or how you do things, because that subtle fear had crept in. I want you guys to know that I did this incredible interview with my friend Rebecca J. Samuel, and it's on her channel here on YouTube, and I'm going to put a link up above to it. We had a phenomenal conversation about triggers. And I think right now, in talking about fear, that video really relates. It really relates to what we're talking about. And being aware of the things that might be triggering you makes a difference. It also makes a difference to know where those subtle things are creeping in, not those big physical response fears, but those subtle fears where you start to change your behaviors and how you see the world and what you're doing and how you're being you. Take time to check that video out after this one. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you on Monday for Move Monday. If you have any questions, that's where we're going to go. Make sure you join the Socially Intelligent Autistic private Facebook group. The link's below, and be sure to comment. Where are some things that fear has subtly crept into your life? Take care.